and NPR and Low Power FM and college and community stations, and on public access TV and PBS TV stations in both TV satellite networks. Dish Network Channel 9415, Free Speech TV, 9410 Link TV, and Direct TV Channel 375, and we're video and audio podcasting at democracynow.org. Our headlines also available in Spanish for any radio station to take. And you can go there to read the full transcripts of the headlines in Spanish and the full transcripts of every show in English as well. We are joined by Naomi Klein, author of The Shock Doctrine and No Logo. She has a cover story of Harper's Magazine, as well as a big piece in The Guardian in Britain. Naomi, you went to Gaza earlier this summer to witness the aftermath of the Israeli attack on Gaza. I wanted to play the comments of Jessica Montel, executive director of the Israeli human rights group at B'Tselem. Last week, the group released a report on the toll from the Gaza assault. The report backs Palestinian findings that over half the 1,400 Palestinian victims were civilians, including 240 children.
The discrepancy between what the Israeli army has reported and what B'Tselem's research has revealed is quite disturbing. The most blatant example regarding children under the age of 16, the Israeli military has claimed that 89 Palestinian children under 16 were killed in Operation Cast Lead. B'Tselem visited families, took death certificates, testimonies, other information from the families on 240 Palestinian children under 16 killed.
That's Jessica Montel of B'Tselem, the Israeli human rights group. Naomi, you recently came back from Gaza, and just before we go to your piece on Jews, blacks, and the, quote, post-racial presidency in Harper's, I want to ask you about that trip.
Well, in many ways, this is, for me, this is why I'm involved in this whole mess around the Toronto International Film Festival, because when I was in Gaza, I was so struck by the fact that Gazans felt that people had forgotten them, and I was told something that really stayed with me. I was working with the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. They were taking me around, and we had a discussion with a group of NGO leaders, women's rights leaders. And one of the things that was said to me was that there was actually more hope during the attack, which seemed than there was now, than there was in the aftermath, which just blindsided me. I mean, how could you say that? How could you say that there was more hope while bombs and missiles were falling when those children were being killed than there is now? And the answer was that when Gazans turned on their televisions, you know, in any kind of war, people who can are watching television to try to get any kind of information they can or listen to the radio. And in addition to the carnage that they were hearing about, they were also hearing reports of a world enraged. They were hearing about those protesters in London, in cities around the world, just rejecting Israel's actions, not buying that this was a defensive war. They heard reports of women in my city, in Toronto, occupying the Consul General's office. Jewish women did this and stayed, and it was an incredible action. And so what I was told by people who I spoke to in Gaza was that there was a feeling that if they could survive these horrific attacks, this would be the turning point, that people were seeing the lawlessness, the brutality of the occupation, and there would be a demand for a new era, that the siege on Gaza, for instance, would have to be lifted. Here they were 6 months later, now 8 months later, and the illegal siege on Gaza continued. There was no justice on the way. I mean, Gaza felt to me like a massive crime scene, but that was being tampered with because the police hadn't shown up, and just the outrage that such brutality, such open brutality, hadn't led to any kind of justice, and that's really what struck with me. So when I got back to the city where I live, Toronto, and found out that we were planning to throw a big party for the State of Israel at our premier cultural event, the Toronto International Film Festival, that's what prompted me to get involved in this protest. Not that I enjoy being called Ahmadinejad's fifth column, I really don't. But, you know, I feel a sort of moral responsibility, having witnessed this sense from so many people in Gaza that these terrible crimes that we just heard about from B'Tselem had been forgotten, and that there was no justice. And when governments fail, you know, when the international community fails, when the UN fails to bring justice, then people have to step in and fill that gap, that vacuum. And that's happened in the past, and it's going to happen again. And this is, I think, why there is such an incredible fear and backlash against attempts to put other kinds of pressure on the state of Israel, not to just leave it up to Obama to talk to Netanyahu and hope that it works out. You know, people are seeing the failure of just high-level moral suasion. And we know that there are other tools in the diplomatic arsenal besides just talk, you know, besides just Obama suggesting to Netanyahu that maybe he shouldn't build more settlements and Netanyahu proceeding to ignore him. There's billions in military aid. There are all of these honors that are given to countries and all of these relationships. And all of them are treated, as, when it comes to Israel, as completely untouchable. And there is an international movement that's growing that is saying, actually, they're not untouchable. We need to use all of these levers in the case of Israel, just as we have the right to use them in the case of any other country that refuses to abide by international law.
On a related